This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the amazing platform to build a lovely online presence. Am I okay? Am I okay? That's what I kept asking myself when I was reading this book. Goddamn. Let's see how many phonies there were. So, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Look at how many phonies are on these pages. Today I am rereading my least favorite classic, The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, to see if I still hate it. So, I read this book for the first time in high school, and I despised it, to be completely honest with you. If you guys have watched my videos, if you are familiar with me, you know I don't dislike books very often. I think that's because the more I read, the more I know my reading taste, and so I always gravitate towards books that have a very good chance of me enjoying them. I don't really read a lot of books that I feel like I might not enjoy. But I have wanted to do this little experiment for a very long time, so as you guys know, or if you don't know, I am a huge classic literature fan. I love classics, I talk about them all the time on my channel, and I love a lot of classics, most classics that I read, but my least favorite classic, I always say, is The Catcher in the Rye. I just basically could not stand this book when I read it, and I haven't read it since high school. Now my question is, now that I'm older, will I have a different perspective? Will I feel the same way about Holden Caulfield? Will I feel the same way about this book? And I'm very intrigued to find out. And so that is what this reading vlog is all about, to see if I still hate this book. I have a weird suspicion that I'm going to love it, and I don't know why. Because it's my least favorite book. I remember hating it so much. And I don't hate books very easily, and I feel like hate is quite a strong word. I didn't like it very much. I disliked it quite a lot. We are also reading this for the book club that I am a co-host of with my very best friend, Emma, from her YouTube channel, Emmy. We co-host the book club Game of Tomes, and every month we pick two books or every 2 months we pick two books, and at the end of the 2 months we compare the two books because they usually have some kind of relation to one another. And the book that we read in March was David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. And to be completely honest, I did not love this book. I was not a huge fan of it. I liked certain aspects of it. I didn't completely dislike it. I didn't completely love it. I don't really know how I feel about this book. There are aspects of it that I like, aspects of it that I don't like, and we are going to have a big discussion when we finish The Catcher in the Rye, which is our book for April, and we are going to discuss these two. They're very, very different books, but why we chose to read David Copperfield, then The Catcher in the Rye, is because of the first page of The Catcher in the Rye, which I will read out to you guys. It is one of my favorite openers, which is so funny because this is, you know, the book that I dislike the most. Okay, if you really want to hear about it, the first thing you'll probably want to know is where I was born, and what my lousy childhood was like, and how my parents were occupied and all before they had me, and all that David Copperfield kind of crap. But I don't feel like going into it, if you want to know the truth. And so that's the first sentence of The Catcher in the Rye, and I think that that's a fantastic opening line because it gives you the personality of Holden right away, and it's just so brilliant. And so I feel like I love that first line, and not to say that I agree with Holden. See, this is where I'm getting very, concerned for my well-being. And my mental state, because am I agreeing with Holden Caulfield? I never thought that I would see the day that I would agree with Holden Caulfield, but not that I think that this book is crap, because I don't. I absolutely don't. I think this book is wonderful in so many ways, but I feel like I just love how he says that David Copperfield's kind of crap, because David Copperfield is very expansive. Dickens goes into so much detail, tells you every aspect of David's life, and it's very wholesome and Dickensian, and there are so many aspects, like I said a million times. I don't want you guys to think that I hated this book, because I didn't. I just didn't fully love it, and I don't really know how to talk about it, because there are so many aspects that I could talk about, but I really want to focus on The Catcher in the Rye for this video. So anyway, I love the fact that we get Holden's personality right away. You can tell that he has read David Copperfield because he knows of the story and says that David Copperfield kind of crap. So I like how we are already from the first line getting a sense of his character, his personality, and his voice. And I think that that's one of the strongest aspects of this story from what I remember. Again, I don't really remember too much of this book because I read it so long ago, but I have a weird suspicion that I'm going to love it. I think I am going to have a greater appreciation of it as a work of fiction, as a novel itself, as a piece of writing, especially because I'm a very different person to when I was in high school. So anyway, without blabbering on, we are going to see if I have been a phony all these years, and maybe I really do like The Catcher in the Rye. So let's start reading, and I will report back with thoughts very soon. Hello again, everyone. So I am back, and I have finished The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Okay, so here's what happened. I started this book, and then a few days later or the next day, I got a really bad cold, and I wasn't feeling up to doing much of anything except reading, and so I didn't vlog because I wasn't feeling too well, and then by the time that I felt better, I wasn't really in the vlog mode. So anyway, this video is going to be more of a book review rather than a reading vlog, and I hope that that's okay. I feel so bad, but I have so many thoughts about this book and I can't wait to share them with you. But before I get into all of my thoughts and whether I loved this book or continued to hate it, is it still my least favorite classic? Is it a new favorite? We will find out. But before we get into that, a quick word from our lovely sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is a website builder which easily allows people to create engaging and unique websites. I have now made my website portfolio through Squarespace, and I truly couldn't be happier with the result. They have so many easy-to-use features, such as customizable page layouts and amazing design tools so you can create your own uniquely personal website. You can even connect your social media accounts so visitors can find you on multiple platforms. From websites, creative portfolios, online stores, and analytics, Squarespace is the perfect platform to build a lovely online presence and run your business. So head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/CarolynMarieReads to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Alright, I'm just gonna come right out and say it. I loved this book. Am I okay? Am I okay? That's what I kept asking myself when I was reading this book, and I was loving it. I just kept thinking, what's wrong with me? Why am I loving this book so much? If you had told my 16-year-old self that my 24-year-old self would love The Catcher in the Rye, I don't think my 16-year-old self would have believed you. She would have thought you were insane. But I loved it. I thought it was amazing. The writing was incredible. Holden's character is just so much more complex than I think a high school student is able to understand, or at least is quite hard for a younger person to understand. I don't know. I don't know if this book should be taught in high school. I don't know. I feel like it could have such a greater effect if maybe it wasn't associated in an academic setting. But that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so if you don't know what The Catcher in the Rye is about, it is basically about a 17-year-old boy who is writing this kind of like a journal where he is getting expelled from his all-boys private school, which is about the third or fourth school that he is being expelled from. And it's him kind of going on this little escapade to New York City because his family is from New York City. He was raised in New York City. He's going back to New York City and kind of just hiding from his family, staying at a hotel, trying to meet up with a bunch of people so that he's not entirely alone. And he is telling us about this experience leaving Pensy, which is his school, and just sort of gallivanting around New York City, meeting up with a bunch of different people, and him basically telling us what has led him to that point, as well as where he's at mentally, emotionally, physically, and what happens to him during this time in New York City. As a New Yorker myself, who I went to university in New York City, I found the setting of New York, the way that he wrote about New York, even though it was many, many years before I went there, it felt very realistic and very true to the vibe of New York, and it felt very authentic, and I really liked that. There was even a brief mention of a town on Long Island called Forest Hills, and I thought that that was so funny because it was just very relatable. It's like reading The Great Gatsby, even though The Great Gatsby is nowhere near, my life is nowhere near as extravagant as The Great Gatsby. I love when they describe Long Island in The Great Gatsby because that's what I know, so it's just really exciting and I loved that aspect of the book. But what I think went over my head in high school was how complex what Holden is going through is. He experienced a lot of very hard, almost traumatic things in his life that he is trying to deal with, and I don't think he has dealt with them yet, or at least properly, or has fully mourned his losses, or I guess spoken about what has gone on in his life. And the way that J.D. Salinger writes his narrative voice, I think, is absolutely brilliant. Still struggling with my cold. I apologize for my crackly voice. So speaking about Holden's narrative voice, I was updating you guys on how many times he says the word phony. So I did keep a tally. Oh my goodness. Okay, I did keep a tally. Let's see how many phonies there were. So 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. According to my tally count, there were 45 phonies. I want to say there were maybe 46 or 47. I believe that I counted all of them, so maybe there are exactly 45. But something else that I loved about Holden's narrative voice was that he not only repeated the word phony about 1,000,000 times, he repeated lousy and boy or oh boy and goddamn about 1,000,000 times. I forgot what the tally was for the goddams, but I can put it on the screen. I thought that it made his narrative voice feel so authentic because I feel like as people, we tend to use certain words and phrases more often than others. For me, I say oh wow and oh my goodness a lot. And I try not to, but whenever someone tells me something or shows me something, my first response is always, oh wow, or oh my goodness, or something like that. And what I loved about this was that it really feels like we are talking to Holden, and that he is speaking to us, or at least writing to us. It almost feels like this is a letter that he sent to us himself. And something that I kept wanting to do was crawl into this book and try and talk to Holden, because I feel like all he really needs is to talk to somebody, possibly a professional, but even just anybody. I feel like if anybody truly listened to him, or he actually spoke about the things that he was dealing with. See, but that's another thing though. I really feel like maybe he doesn't realize the great effect that everything's having on him. So I want to talk about the trauma that Holden has gone through. So he speaks briefly about certain things that have happened to him that are resulting in why he is acting the way that he is, or why certain things are happening. Another thing, not only is his mental health brought into question, but also his physical health. A lot of the things that happens to him relates to his physical health, where he'll be doing something and he'll say that he got really lightheaded, or that he is feeling sick, or something along those lines, or he's not doing well, not feeling well. He acknowledges it, but he sort of brushes it off, kind of like everything, even with things that are affecting him emotionally. He sort of brushes everything off. I feel like you just need to talk to someone, and someone needs to talk to you on a deeper level than the people that he is talking to in the story, or at least the people that he's meeting up with. So one of the first things that really broke my heart was when he tells us about his younger brother, Ali. The first time that he mentions his younger brother, Ali, is on page 38 of this edition that I have, and he says, "My brother Ali had this left-handed fielder's mitt. He was left-handed. The thing that was descriptive about it, though, was that he had poems written all over the fingers and the pockets and everywhere. He wrote them on it so that he'd have something to read while he was in the field and nobody was up at bat. He's dead now. He got leukemia and died when we were up in Maine on July 18th, 1946. You'd have liked him. He was 2 years younger than I was, but he was about 15 times as intelligent. He was terrifically intelligent. His teachers were always writing letters to my mother telling her what a pleasure it was having a boy like Ali in their class. And they weren't just shooting the crap, they really meant it. But it wasn't just that he was the most intelligent member of the family, he was also the nicest in lots of ways. He never got mad at anybody. And the way that he talks about Ali is just so sweet, and you could really tell how much he loved his brother. And then on the next page it says, I slept in the garage the night he died, and I broke all the goddamn windows with my fist, just for the hell of it. I even tried to break all the windows on the station wagon we had that summer, but my hand was already broken and everything by that time. And I couldn't do it. It was a very stupid thing to do, I'll admit, but I hardly didn't even know I was doing it, and you didn't know Ali. And just the way that he speaks about him is so heartbreaking, and it really feels like he truly hasn't mourned his brother's loss, especially the way that he talks about his parents later on in the book, and his relationship with his little sister Phoebe. Oh my god, the sweetest thing on the planet! Another thing that Holden does is he always uses the word depressed whenever he talks about anything. He always says, you know, I was really depressed, or that made me really depressed. Like, for example, he says right here, New York's terrible when somebody laughs on the street very late at night. You can hear it for miles. It makes you feel so lonesome and depressed. And I highlighted and tabbed that because with my experience living in New York City, it is quite a lonely experience if you don't have like a solid group of people that you are constantly hanging out with, just because New York by yourself, if you're walking around from place to place on your own. These birds are very chatty. Oh my goodness. Anyway, they also have thoughts about The Catcher in the Rye. So New York can just be quite a lonely place when you're by yourself, and the way that he talked about how when someone laughs in New York, even though it's a laugh and there are other people there, it is very lonesome, and like he says, it makes you feel so lonesome and depressed. And he does that quite a lot where he'll describe things as depressing or being depressed. Another thing that I loved about this book was that it was constantly making me laugh. The way that Holden writes certain things and the way that he talks about certain things is so funny. And for example, okay, so this one part he's talking about horsing around with a girl. So he says, when I'm horsing around with a girl, I have a hell of a lot of trouble just finding what I'm looking for God's sake, if you know what I mean. Take this girl that I just missed having sexual intercourse with that I told you about. It took me about an hour just to get her goddamn brassiere off. By the time I did get it off, she was about ready to spit in my eye. I literally just wrote ha 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 in the margins because I just think it's so funny. And then another part, he says, I always pick a gorgeous time to fall over a suitcase or something. I just love the way that he takes these kind of like awkward situations, or he just tells us these stories but makes them really humorous. And then also he writes about things that are quite difficult topics and more emotional. And I just feel like the juxtaposition between the humor and the sorrow is beautifully done and very authentic and human and natural, because I feel like I even do that a lot myself, is when I find something emotionally difficult that I'm dealing with, I usually try and make a joke out of it or try and find like the funny part of it, or just to lighten the mood, I guess, or I don't know. But I thought that the way that he kind of talks about hard topics and then moves on to something with a little bit more of a humorous tone to it is really human. Yeah, and I love that part. She was about ready to spit in my eye. Okay, so chapter 14 is another great example of Holden revealing really how depressed he is and how emotionally strained he is. So it says, "Boy, I felt miserable. I felt so depressed you can't imagine. What I did, I started talking, sort of out loud, to Allie. I do that sometimes when I get very depressed. I keep telling him to go home and get his bike and meet me in front of Bobby Fallon's house. Bobby Fallon used to live quite near us in Maine. This is years ago. Anyway, what happened was, one day Bobby and I were going over to the lake on our bikes. We were going to take our lunches and all, and our BB guns. We were kids and all, and we thought we could shoot something with our BB guns. Anyway, Allie heard us talking about it and he wanted to go, and I wouldn't let him. I told him he was a child. So once in a while now, when I get very depressed, I keep saying to him, 'Okay, go home and get your bike and meet me in front of Bobby's house. Hurry up.' It wasn't that I didn't used to take him with me when I went somewhere. I did. But that one day I didn't. He didn't get sore about it. He never got sore about anything. But I keep thinking about it anyway, when I get very depressed." Again, it's just steeped in, I think, unresolved sorrow, or just something that I feel like maybe he needs to talk to his family about. And just the way that he's by himself in this scene and he just starts talking out loud to Allie to comfort himself because he's feeling really depressed. Like, he said the word depressed about, I don't know, 4 times when in that one paragraph. And I guess I just never realized the gravity of what Holden is trying to go through emotionally. So I loved that part, but it also made me really sad, obviously. Also, really quickly, look at how many phonies are on these pages. So many. And then another thing that Holden does quite a lot is he talks about death a lot. Like on page 155, he says, "I kept worrying that I was getting pneumonia with all these hunks of ice in my hair and that I was going to die. I felt sorry as hell for my mother and father, especially my mother because she still isn't over my brother Allie yet." And I feel like that's like a huge statement to say. And then he sort of continues on. He says, "I keep picturing her not knowing what to do with all my suits and athletic equipment and all. The only good thing, I knew she wouldn't let old Phoebe come to my goddamn funeral because she was only a little kid. That was the only good part. Then I thought about the whole bunch of them sticking me in a goddamn cemetery and all, with my name on this tombstone and all, surrounded by dead guys. Boy, when you're dead, they really fix you up. I hope to hell when I do die, somebody has sense enough to just dump me in a river or something. Anything except sticking me in a goddamn cemetery. People coming and putting a bunch of flowers on your stomach on Sunday and all that crap. Who wants flowers when you're dead? Nobody. When the weather's nice, my parents go out quite frequently and stick a bunch of flowers on old Allie's grave. I went with them a couple of times, but I cut it out. The first time I certainly didn't enjoy seeing him in that crazy cemetery, surrounded by dead guys and tombstones and all. It wasn't too bad when the sun was out, but twice we were there when it started to rain. It was awful. It rained on his lousy tombstone, and it rained on the grass on his stomach. It rained all over the place. All the visitors that were there visiting the cemetery started running like hell over to their cars. That's what nearly drove me crazy. All the visitors could get in their cars and turn on their radios and all, and then go someplace nice for dinner. Everybody except Allie. I couldn't stand it. I know it's only his body and all that's in the cemetery and his soul's in heaven and all that crap, but I can't stand it anyway. I just wish he wasn't there. You didn't know him. If you'd known him, you'd know what I mean. It's not too bad when the sun's out, but the sun only comes out when it feels like coming out." The way that he talks about Allie and the way that he just everything about this is so heartbreaking. And I did not remember this book being so heartbreaking. And then on that same page, he says, "I guess I thought I'd take my mind off getting pneumonia and dying. I didn't, though. I started thinking how old Phoebe, his little sister, would feel if I got pneumonia and died. It was a childish way to think, but I couldn't stop myself. She'd feel pretty bad if something like that happened. She likes me a lot. I mean, she's quite fond of me. She really is. Anyway, I couldn't get that off my mind, so finally what I figured I'd sneak home and see her in case I died and all." So now he's talking about sneaking back into his family's apartment to visit his little sister, and he's talking about going very quietly past his parents' room, and he says, "I even held my breath for God's sake. You can hit my father over the head with a chair and he won't wake up, but my mother, all you have to do to my mother is cough somewhere in Siberia and she'll hear you. She's nervous as hell. Half the time she's up all night smoking cigarettes. After about an hour, I got to old Phoebe's room. So the fact that I just thought that was so funny. All you have to do to my mother is cough somewhere in Siberia and she'll hear you. And then finally, after about an hour, I got to old Phoebe's room. I just think that he has a great way of being very sad and melancholy and then being really funny, like on the next page. And then the scenes with his little sister Phoebe are so wonderful because it's the first time we really see Holden as this really kind older brother figure. And another really heartbreaking part is, again, they're talking about Allie. So this is, I believe Phoebe's about 7 years old and Holden is 17. And Phoebe is asking Holden, name one thing that you like, because Phoebe is saying that all you say is that you hate things and that you hate people and like name one thing that you like. And Holden says, I like Allie, I said, and I like doing what I'm doing right now, sitting here with you and talking and thinking about stuff. And Allie's dead. You always say that. If somebody's dead and everything and in heaven, then it isn't really... I know he's dead. Don't you think I know that? I can still like him though, can't I? Just because somebody's dead, you don't just stop liking them, for God's sake. Especially if they were about 1,000 times nicer than the people you know that are alive and all. Old Phoebe didn't say anything. So just the way that they talk about Allie and the way that the one thing that Holden admits that he likes is his brother, Allie, who is not here anymore. Like, just so incredibly heartbreaking. And then I think what I'm going to possibly leave you with, because I feel like I can talk on and on about this book forever, is the scene where the title of the book makes sense or is referenced or explained. And that is on page 173 of my edition. Phoebe's asking him what he would like to be, what Holden would like to be. And he says, you know what I'd like to be, I said. You know what I'd like to be? I mean, if I had my goddamn choice. What? Stop swearing. You know that song, If a Body Catch a Body Comin' Through the Rye? I'd like, it's If a Body Meet a Body Comin' Through the Rye, old Phoebe said. It's a poem by Robert Burns. I know it's a poem by Robert Burns. She was right, though. It is If a Body Meet a Body Comin' Through the Rye. I didn't know that then, though. I always thought it was If a Body Catch a Body, I said. Anyway, I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all. Thousands of little kids, and nobody's around, nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I'd do all day. I'd just be the catcher in the rye and all. I know it's crazy, but that's the only thing I'd really like to be. I know it's crazy. I thought that that was quite literally the sweetest thing ever. Like, all Holden wants to do is to catch and save all these kids who are playing in a field of rye from falling off of the cliff. Just, like, weirdly, I find Holden lovable. Like, what? What? I thought Holden was the most detestable character. And I read that after feeling that way through the entire book, and he's just... he's just so complex, and I think that that's what makes him so human, and that all he wants to do is be with his late brother and his little sister, and he just wants to catch these little kids and save these little kids from passing away. And I think that has to have something to do with his brother passing away at a young age, especially his little brother, where he wants to save these little kids. Oh, God. My heart. And then the ending, I realized, was the significance of why on the original... also, did I tell you guys about this edition? But that's why there is a carousel horse. Are they called a carousel horse? I mean, it's a carousel and it's the horse on the carousel. That's why there is a carousel horse on the cover, is one of the final scenes in the book. But I got this edition. I was writing at my library, so I love going to my library and writing. I'm working on my own book, and My library has a little used bookshop, and I went in there and they had this edition. It's a hardback with the other cover of The Catcher in the Rye, this is the cover that it's really known for, and the one that J.D. Salinger loved. And I realized why there was the carousel horse on the cover, and it's because of the final scene, or one of the final scenes in the book, where Phoebe is on the carousel horse and Holden is watching her. And he says, "I felt so damn happy all of a sudden. The way old Phoebe kept going around and around. I was damn near bawling. I felt so damn happy, if you want to know the truth. I don't know why. It was just that she looked so damn nice, the way she kept going around and around in her blue coat and all. God, I wish you could have been there." And then he begins the last chapter with saying, "That's all I'm going to tell about. I could probably tell you what I did after," and then I don't want to spoil the last chapter, but the ending sort of reminded me about the way that Hemingway ends A Farewell to Arms, where he sort of brings us into this snippet of time and a snippet of part of his life and just sort of cuts it off because that's all that he wants to tell you. And he just leaves it at that, and I feel like that makes it very real as well. Like, this whole book feels very authentic and true and human, and I think the ending perfectly mirrored that as well, because it just feels like this is part of Holden's, coming of age, and Holden just decides to end it wherever he feels like it. It feels like a diary that was never fully finished, or at least he's choosing when he wants to finish it because it's his story to tell, and I just loved that. So I gave it 4 stars on Goodreads because part of me feels, I don't know, like it's between a 4 and a 5. After talking about it for so long to you guys, where I've talked I think for 40 minutes now, and I'm gonna have to cut this down, I really loved this book and I thought it was amazing, and I did not expect that at all. I did not expect to want to buy a second hardcover copy. Oh my goodness. You guys know when I love a book, I love having multiple editions, and was I expecting to have multiple editions of The Catcher in the Rye? Was I expecting The Catcher in the Rye to go from my least favorite classic to one of my favorites? Absolutely not. But that is what I love about revisiting books that you read when you were younger, is that you change as a reader, you change as a person. I am very different to who I was when I first read this book, and my perspective on life is very different, and just, it's so wonderful to see that change and to see that the book stays the same, but it's you that's different, and I just love that. So those are all of my thoughts on The Catcher in the Rye. Thank you so much for joining us. If you joined us for the book club this month, we are going to have our live show very, very, very soon, and I can't wait to talk to you guys about it. It was just so wonderful to go on this journey with you guys. I loved seeing all of your posts and everything on Instagram, and I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts about the book. I can't wait to discuss it further in the live show, during the live show, and I can't believe that The Catcher in the Rye has become one of my new favorites. What the heck? I was expecting to like it, but I was not expecting to love it, and I am just so happy to go on this journey with you, like I said. So thank you so much for watching this video and hearing me ramble on and on and on. If you have stayed until the very end, I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much. I would love to hear what you guys thought about The Catcher in the Rye, if you read it with us this month or last month, or if it's a book that you read and loved or disliked many years ago, whether you joined us with the book club or not. I would love to know your thoughts on The Catcher in the Rye. Maybe even share with me one of your favorite quotes or a favorite scene, or what you think about Holden. I would just love to hear. I would love to talk to you guys about this book, and yes, so I look forward to talking about this book in the live show and with you guys in the comments. So for the millionth time, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate your kindness and support more than I can say, and I hope you're having an amazing day or night wherever you are. I am sending you my warmest wishes, and happy reading.